Today's going to be chapter 8. I don't know how to put a title on this. If I can figure it out, I will. But otherwise, I'll just say the chapter number at the very beginning of my reading. We're going to read chapter 8 of The Princess of the Goblin today. But first, we're going to read, why did Jesus have to die for my sins when I haven't really done anything bad? You might think of some sins. I think Granddaddy read that, didn't he? That no, there's really no such thing. Why did Jesus die? Anyway, I'm going to read it. You might think of some sins as big and some as little. There's really no such thing. Some sins are easy to spot, like if you trip a friend. Some hurt people a lot, like if that friend falls down and chips a tooth. But all sins are wrong. God tells us that even every little sin is really bad. You also might think you don't sin very often, but we all do many wrong things. Here's what's important to remember. All sins are bad enough that Jesus had to die for them. All sins, even one sin, hurts our friendship with God. Like James said, the person who keeps all of the laws except one is still as guilty as the person who has broken all of God's laws. Being honest about our sins is the first step to understanding our need for forgiveness. Now, 1 John chapter 1, verses 8 and 9 say, if we say we have no sin, we're only fooling ourselves and refusing to accept the truth. But if we confess our sins to him, he is faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us from every wrong thing that we do. Okay, so now I'm going to read chapter 8 of The Princess and the Goblin. Now, the last chapter had us Granddaddy read it. It's about the creatures of the Cobbs. So the very next week, during the whole of the week, Irene had been thinking every other moment of her promise to the old lady. Although even now she could not feel quite sure that she had not been dreaming. Could it really be that an old lady lived up in the top of the house with pigeons and a spinning wheel and a lamp that never went out? She was, however, nonetheless determined to ascend the three sets of stairs on the coming Friday, and walk through the passages with the many doors, and to try to find the tower in which she had either seen or dreamed about her great-great-great-great-grandmother. Now at length the longed-for day arrived, and lest Ludi should be moved to watch her too closely, Irene endeavored to keep herself as well behaved as possible. So in the afternoon she asked for her doll's house and went on arranging and rearranging the various rooms and their inhabitants for a whole hour. Then she gave a sigh and threw herself back in her chair. One of the dolls would not sit and another would not stand, and they were all very tiresome now, and besides it was getting dark, and the darker it got, the more excited Irene became. I see you want your tea now, Princess, said the nurse. I'll go and get it. The room feels close, so I'm going to open the window a little bit. The evening is very mild, so it won't hurt you. Oh, there's no fear of that, Ludi, said Irene, wishing the nurse had put off going for the tea until it was darker, when she might have made her escape. I fancy Ludi was longer in returning than she had intended, because when Irene, who had been lost in thought, looked up, she saw that it was nearly dark. At the same moment, she caught sight of a pair of eyes, bright with a green light, glowering at her through the open window. The next instant, something leapt into the room. It was like a cat, with legs as long as a horse's, but its body no bigger and its legs no thicker than those of a cat. Irene was too frightened to cry out, but not too frightened to jump up from her chair and run from the room. Let me show you the picture of the critter. It looks like a cat with super long legs and long ears. Weird looking critter. It's plain enough to every one of my readers out there what she ought to have done, and indeed Irene thought of it herself, but when she came to the foot of the old stair just outside the nursery door, She imagined the creature running up those long flights after her and pursuing her through the dark passages, which, after all, might not lead to a tower. That thought was just too much for her. Her heart failed her, and turning from the stairs, she rushed along to the hall, where she found the front door open, and she darted outside into the courtyard, being chased by, at least she thought so, by that creature. No one happened to see her, so on she ran, straight out of the gate and up the mountain. This was very foolish indeed, thus to run farther and farther from everybody who could help her, as if she had been seeking a fit spot for the goblin creature to eat her at his leisure. Well, the princess was soon out of breath with running uphill, but she ran on and on, for she fancied the horrible creature just behind her, forgetting that such long legs as those would have overtaken her long time ago. But at last she could run no farther and no longer, and she fell, unable even to scream, by the roadside. She lay there for some time, half dead with terror. But finding nothing laying hold of her, nothing eating her, and her breath beginning to come back, she ventured at length to get up and look anxiously about her. It was now so dark she couldn't see anything. There wasn't a single star out. She couldn't even tell in what direction the house was between her and home. She fancied the dreadful creature that was lying there, ready to pounce upon her. But she saw now that she ought to have run up the stairs at once. It was well she did not scream, for, although very few of the goblins had come out for weeks, a stray idler or two might have heard her. She sat down upon a stone, and nobody but one who had done something wrong could have been more miserable. A raindrop fell on her face. She looked up, and for a moment her terror was lost in astonishment. A great silvery globe was hanging in the air, and as she gazed at the lovely thing, her courage revived. What could that light be? What if it should be? Oh, yes, it had to be her great-great-grandmother's lamp, which guided her pigeons home through the darkest nights. She jumped up. She had but to keep that light in view, and she had to find the house. Her heart grew stronger. Speedily, yet softly, she walked down the hill, hoping to pass the watching creature unseen. Dark as it was, there was now little danger of choosing the wrong road, and by looking at the lamp and then dropping her eyes, she could see the road for a yard or two in front of her, and this saved her from several falls, for the road was very rough. But all at once, to her dismay, the light vanished, and the terror of the beast again laid hold of her heart. The same instant, however, she caught sight of the light of the windows in the house, and she knew exactly where she was. It was too dark to run, but she made what haste she could, and she reached her gate in safety. She found the house door still open, ran through the hall, and without even looking into the nursery, bounded straight up the stairs, and the next, and the next, and then turning to the right, ran through the long avenue of silent rooms, and found her way at once to the door at the foot of the tower stair. When first the nurse missed her, she fancied she was playing her a trick, and for some time took no trouble about her. But at last, getting scared, she had begun to look for her, and when the princess entered, the whole household was running hither and thither over the house, hunting for her. A few seconds after she reached the stair of the tower, they had even begun to search the neglected rooms. But by this time she was knocking at the old lady's door. "Come in, Irene," said the silvery voice of her grandmother. The princess opened the door and peeped in, but the room was very dark, and there was no sound of the spinning wheel. She grew frightened once more, thinking that although the room was there, the old lady might be a dream after all. She remembered, though, that at night she spun only in the moonlight, and concluded that must be why there was no sweet bee-like humming. Before she had time to think another thought, she heard the voice again, saying as before, "Come in, Irene." From the sound, she understood at once that the old lady wasn't in the room beside her. Perhaps she was in her bedroom. She turned across the passage, feeling her way to the other door, opened it, and went in. Oh, what a lovely haven to reach from the darkness and fear through which she had come. The soft light made her feel as if she were going into the heart of the milkiest pearl. "I've lighted a fire for you, Irene. You're cold and wet," said her grandmother. Then Irene looked again and saw that what she had taken for a huge bouquet of red roses on a low stand against the wall was in fact a fire, which burned in the shapes of the loveliest and reddest roses, glowing gorgeously between the heads and wings of two little cherubs of shining silver. And when she came nearer, she found that the smell of roses with which the room was filled came from the fire roses on the hearth. Her grandmother was dressed in the loveliest pale blue velvet, over which her hair, no longer white, but of a rich golden color, streamed like a cataract. I don't know what a cataract is, or I'd tell you. It flowed from under the edge of a circle of shining silver set with alternating pearls and opals. Her face was that of a woman of 23. Here's her picture. And there's the fireplace with the roses in it. Her grandmother was, I already read that. The princess was so bewildered with astonishment and admiration that she drew nigh with timidity, feeling dirty and uncomfortable. The lady was seated on a low chair by the side of the fire with hands outstretched to take her, but the princess hung back with a troubled smile. "Why, what's the matter?" asked her grandmother. "You haven't been doing anything wrong. I know that by your face, although it is rather miserable looking. What's the matter, my dear?" And she still held out her arms. "Dear grandmother," said Irene, "I'm not so sure that I haven't done something wrong. I ought to have run up to you at once when the long-legged cat came in at the window instead of running out on the mountain." "You were taken by surprise, my child, and are not so likely to do that again. It is when people do wrong things willfully that they are the more likely to do them again. Now come to me." "But grandmother, you're so beautiful and grand with your crown on, and I am so dirty with mud and rain. I would quite spoil your beautiful blue dress." With a merry little laugh, the lady sprang from her chair, caught the child to her, and kissing the tear-stained face over and over, sat down with her in her lap. "Oh, grandmother, you'll make yourself such a mess." "You darling, do you think I care more for my dress than for my little girl? Besides, look here." As she spoke, she set her down, and Irene saw to her dismay that the lovely dress was covered with the mud, from her fall on the mountain road. But the lady stooped to the fire, and taking from it one of the burning roses by its stalk, passed it once and again and a third time over the front of her dress. When Irene looked, not a single stain was to be discovered there. "There," said her grandmother, "you won't mind coming to me now." But Irene again hung back, eyeing the flaming rose that the lady held in her hand. "You're not afraid of this rose, are you?" she said, about to throw it on the hearth again. "Oh, please don't," cried Irene. "Won't you hold it to my frock and my hands and my face? And I'm afraid my feet and my knees will want it too." "No," answered her grandmother, smiling a little sadly, as she threw the rose from her. "It's too hot for you just yet. It would set your frock in a flame. Besides, I don't want to make you clean tonight. I want your nurse and the rest of the people to see you as you are, for you will have to tell them how you ran away for fear of a long-legged cat. I should like to wash you, but they would not believe you then." "Very well, grandmother," answered Irene, and she was again silent for some moments, thinking. Then she said, "How was it, grandmother, that I saw your beautiful lamp, not the light of it only, but the great round silvery lamp itself, hanging alone in the great open air, high up? It was your lamp I saw, wasn't it?" "Yes, my child, it was my lamp." "Then how was that? I don't see a window." "When I please, I can make the lamp shine through the walls, shine so strong that it melts them away from before the sight and shows itself as you saw it. But as I told you, not everybody can see the lamp." "Well, how is it that I can, then?" "It's a gift born with you, and one day I hope everybody will have it. But," added the lady, rising, "you must sit in my chair while I get you the present I have been preparing for you. I told you my spinning was for you. It is finished now, and I'm going to fetch it. I've been keeping it warm under one of my brooding pigeons." Irene sat down in the low chair, and her grandmother left her, shutting the door behind her. The child sat gazing now at the rose fire, now at the starry walls, now at the silver light, and a great quietness grew in her heart. If all the long-legged cats in the world had come rushing at her, she would not have been afraid of them for a moment. She had been gazing at the lovely lamp for some minutes fixedly. Turning her eyes, she found the wall had vanished, for she was looking out on the dark, cloudy night. But though she heard the wind blowing, none of it blew upon her. In a moment more, the clouds themselves parted, or rather vanished like the wall, and she was looking straight into the stars, flashing gloriously in the dark blue. But it was only a moment. The clouds again gathered and shut out the stars. The wall gathered again and shut out the clouds, and there stood the lady beside her, with the loveliest smile on her face and a shimmering ball in her hand about the size of a pigeon's egg. "There, Irene, there's my work for you," she said, holding out the ball to the princess. Irene took it in her hand, looked it all over. It sparkled a little and shone here and there, but not much. It was a sort of gray-white, something like spun glass. "Is this all you're spinning, grandmother?" "All since you came to the house. There's more there than you think." "How pretty it is! What am I to do with it, please?" "That I will now explain to you," said the lady, turning from her and going to her cabinet. She came back with a small ring in her hand. Then she took the ball from Irene's and did something with them. Irene could not tell what. "Give me your hand," she said. Irene held up her right hand. "Yes, that is the hand I want," said the lady, and she put the ring on the forefinger of her right hand. "What a beautiful ring," said Irene. "What is the stone called?" "It's called a fire opal." "Oh, please, can I keep it?" "Always." "Oh, grandmother, I will take such care of it." "But," she added, hesitating, "but what?" "What am I to say when Ludi asks me where I got it?" You will ask her where you got it," answered the lady, smiling. "I don't see how I can do that." "You will, though, but don't trouble yourself about it. You will see when the time comes." So saying, the lady turned and threw the little ball into the rose fire. "Grandmother!" exclaimed Irene. "I thought you had spun it for me. Now it's burnt in the fire." The lady put her hand in the fire, brought out the ball, glimmering as before, and held it towards her. Irene stretched out her hand to take it, but the lady turned and, going to her cabinet, opened a drawer and laid the ball in it. "Have I done anything to vex you, grandmother?" said Irene pitifully. "No, my darling, but you must understand that no one ever gives anything to another properly and really without keeping it first. That ball is yours." "But, oh, I'm not to take it with me. You're going to keep it for me." "No, you are going to take it with you. I fastened the end of it to the ring on your finger." Irene looked at the ring. "I can't see it there, grandmother." Feel it a little way from the ring towards the cabinet," said the lady. "I do feel it," exclaimed the princess, "but I can't see it." "No," the grandmother said, the thread is too fine for you to see it. Now you can fancy how much spinning that took, although it does seem like such a little ball. But what use can I make of it if it lies in your cabinet? That is what I will explain to you. Now listen. If ever you find yourself in any danger, like, for example, as you were in this evening, you must take off your ring and put it under the pillow of your bed. Then you must lay your forefinger, the same that wore the ring, upon the thread and follow the thread wherever it leads you. How delightful! It will lead me to you, grandmother. I know it. Yes, it will. But remember, it may seem to you a very roundabout way indeed, and you must not doubt the thread. Of one thing you may be sure, that while you hold it, I hold it too. It's very wonderful, but, said Irene, still puzzled, won't the thread get in somebody's way and be broken? If the one end is fast to my ring and the other laid in your cabinet, you will find all that will arrange itself. I'm afraid it's time for you to go. Everybody in the house is just miserable about you, and it would be cruel to keep them so all night. You must go downstairs. I'm so glad you didn't say go home, for this is my home. May I call this my home? You may, my child, and I trust you will always think it your home. Now come, I must take you back without anyone seeing you. I want to ask you one question more, please. Is it because you have your crown on that you look so young?" "No, child," answered her grandmother. "It's because I felt so young this evening that I put my crown on. And I thought you would like to see your old grandmother in her very best." "Why do you call yourself old? You're not old, grandmother." "Oh, I'm very old indeed. It's so silly of people to fancy that old age means crookedness and witheredness and feebleness and sticks and spectacles like these and rheumatism like this and forgetfulness. Old age has nothing whatever to do with all that. The right old age means strength and beauty and mirth, which is happiness, and courage and clear eyes and strong, painless limbs. I am older than you are able to even think." "And look at you, grandmother," cried Irene, jumping up and flinging her arms about her neck. "I won't be so silly again, I promise you. I wish I were as old as you, grandmother. I don't think you are ever afraid of anything." "Well, not for long, at least, my child. Perhaps by the time I am 2,000 years old, I shall never be afraid of anything. But I confess I have sometimes been afraid about my children. Sometimes about you, Irene." "Oh, I'm so sorry, grandmother. Tonight, I suppose you mean." "Yes, tonight a little, but a good deal when you had all but made up your mind that I was a dream and no real great-great-grandmother. You must not suppose I'm blaming you for that. I dare say you could not help it." "I don't know, grandmother," said the princess, beginning to cry. "I can't always do myself as I should like, and I don't always try. I'm very sorry, anyhow." The lady stooped, lifted Irene in her arms, and sat down with her in her chair, holding her close. In a few minutes the princess had sobbed herself to sleep. How long she slept, I do not know. When she came to herself, she was sitting in her own high chair at the nursery table with her doll's house in front of her.